Henry d'Arbia de Jubenville says, before the Phoenician conquests and before the Ligurian, Sordes or the Sardans, the Iberian people occupied all or almost all of the present-day Frusca coast of the Mediterranean, between the Pyrenees and Rhodan River, and the island of Sardinia, which they gave their name. Pomponius Mela, Pliny, and Rufus Avienus wrote about these Serbs in southern Rhodania. De Jubenville also says about them, Sordi, Sordoni, or Sardoni were also north of the Pyrenees on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, east of Pyrenees, and they seem to be Iberians. Their name is the same with one river that flowed through the landscape. It looks like the same as Sardana, the ancient inhabitants of Sardinia, those who were at war in Egypt in 14th century BC, and who, according to us, are also Iberians. At the time of Julius' conquest, they owned land in Rhodania between the Garonne River and Pyrenees Ocean and Pelag. In that area, one river was called Srbica. From their name came the name Argon, land and kingdom. These Serbs defeated Charlemagne on his return from Spain. It seems that their Basque allies also helped them in that. The battle was fought on Serbian territory, which can be seen from the song about that battle when Prince Roland realizes that everything is lost, so that his sword would not fall into the hands of the enemy, he breaks it on the rocks of Sardinia. Appian of Alexandria, 1st century AD, a famous writer of Roman history, says in the Illyricum section, Cyclop Polypheme had with his wife Galatea 3 sons, Celt, Illyr, and Gaul, who went from Sicela and gave names to 3 people. Of the many traditions among many nations, this seemed to me the most probable of all. Appian then lists the Serbian tribes, portraying them as the sons and daughters of the Illyrians. These are Angel, Autariat, Dardan, Med, Taula, Perheb, Parto, Daorto, and Dasaro. From these sons and daughters came the tribes Enheli, meaning farmers, Autarians, those are Anti-Tariati, Dardani, Parteni, Daserati, and Daorsi. From the Autariates came the Pannonians or the Paeonians, and from these the Skordiski, Sorbiski, and Trivali. Appian continues, Ardei, Ardeai, and Liburni are Illyrian tribes. Ardi are Sardis, that is Serbs, or Serbs. The Serbs are not an Illyrian tribe, but some of the Serbs are called Illyrians. Appian says, the people, Illyrians, and also Pannonians, Rhetians, Noricans, Mesis of Europe, and others, the neighboring tribes who inhabit the right bank of the Danube, were distinguished by the Romans, but they believed that the whole of Illyria is included under a common national symbol. From the source of the Danube to the Black Sea, everything is under one head, and the tax is called Illyrian tax. Paeonis are great people on the Danube, spread from Iapod to Dardan. They are called Paeons by the Greeks and Pannons by the Romans. They have been famous since Macedonian times, though Agrian, who gave great help to Philip the Alexander, and were the Paeons of Lower Pannonia on a border of Illyria. Paeonis or Pannonians or Agriani are Serbs from the area of Sofia, who was called Srbica. We can confidently say that Appian did not write this name this way, but it is a modification by its publishers. Sofia did not have the name Agriana, but Serdica. This presentation of Appian, in a way it is told, reminds us of one from the Old Testament, where every nation had one ancestor of the same name. According to the legend, the Cyclop Polyphemus lived on So Appian accordingly says that his sons were born on Sicily, and from there they dispersed to their own country. With this pictorial depiction, Appian tells us that the people known as the Illyrians, Celts, and Gauls are of the same origin. The Greeks used the name Celts and Romans Gauls for the same people. This means that we are not talking about the three similar people, but about two, that is, only one, Serbs. The name Celts was first mentioned by Herodotus, and it does not mark some of the most famous of certain people, but it is applied in a broader and indefinite sense. Strabon says, "The Greeks called all the people in the north they knew Scythians, and later when they met the western people, they called them all Celts, Iberians, mixed Celtiberians or Celtic Scythians, putting out of ignorance under these names of different people. This is how the Ethiopians called all other countries in the south, near the ocean." Regarding the naming of the foreign people, historical figures and places by Greek writers, Josephus says, "I want to draw attention to one thing before I move forward, which the Greeks may not take seriously, and that is that they change their names to sound closer to them in their language. But my people do not do such a thing, nor do they allow it. Some names have been partially mutilated, some have been translated into Greek, and some have simply been replaced by Greek names that have nothing to do with the original. We have seen that the Greeks changed the name Geti to Heti and Kati, and then to Celts. Boschar's amounts that the Jews called Galate Kalat, which should read Halat, and the Chaldeans called them Halta or Shelta, and name quite close to the name Kelta. It is obvious that Helta, Heta, the name in which someone, probably for a louder or easier pronunciation, entered the word Lama, the Greeks have those two forms of the name Heti and Celti, and among Latins Ceti Celti. This is obviously the same name in which accidentally or on purpose was replaced one letter, which means that Celti are actually Heti or Geti, name which was present in all areas occupied by the tribes of Serbian race. The Celts in Western Europe are nothing but the ruling Aryan class, in the same way as in Asia. Bouquet says that Gaul was also called Bebrukia, Bebrike. The ancient writers called Bithynia Mygdonia. It consisted of the provinces of Tunisia, Mariandina, and Bebruke, Bebrikes. Cuvier argues for several reasons that the Germans, Illyrians, Bithyns, and Iberians spoke in a Celtic language. Their speeches did not differ from each other except in dialect. Western Europe was not a deserted country when the Serbian invaders arrived there, but it was inhabited, so they imposed their power on the natives with whom they eventually mixed. Celtic mythology is Serbian as in the East, and over time the language has become a mixture of Serbian and the indigenous, just like in the East. What is called Celtic language today, in everything related to religion, customs, military and state organization, belongs to Serbian language. In addition to this, there is the present language of another nation or several nations, which is completely incomprehensible to us. Western historians avoid talking about indigenous population of the Western Europe, although they know very well that it existed and left wide traces. They identify everything with Celts, just as they from later times tried to identify everything with Romans. Thus they became conquerors, victors, and the aristocratic ruling class. In France today, they avoid talking about Gauls from the time before the Roman conquest. For Gaelic, the language is said to have disappeared except for a few insignificant words. When we talk about Gauls, we usually start with well-known Halo-Roman coin. It is not allowed to talk about a large number of Serbs in a modern of Serbisms in modern French language It is considered the greatest heresy. One of the most famous European nations is the Ligurians. Joshua Whatmoff claims that their language was not Aryan. Pelutier says that the name Liguria means rebellious, unlike the Scythians, which means nomads. It is quite understandable that the Serbian tribes, which moved so much through Europe and Asia, looked at natives, in this case the Ligurians, as people who do not move. They remain in the same place all the time. Historical facts indicate that the Celts came to Western Europe as the Goths came later, as a conqueror and warrior company that imposed its rule on the native people. Diodorus gave an accurate account of their role. The Celts imposed a tribute to a large part of Europe and not a small part of Asia, and settled in countries of the people who they conquered in war.